we'd like to put on the deposition designation of Cindy Wilson.
And any objections? Do we have those already?
I need to explain something, Your Honor. I stayed up very late last night, and my designations for Cindy Wilson were, well, misconceived largely. But we didn't want to lose the time and productivity today. So what we've agreed on amongst ourselves, if it suits you, is we took out 2 passages, and then we just said that we'll just go ahead and read the rest, and then we would submit our respective objections to anything in the entirety on Monday.
Okay.
Okay?
That's your opinion?
Yeah, we don't have an objection to that, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. All right, you may proceed, please, sir. Yes.
Ms. Wilson, my name is Lane Davis, and I know we just met, but for purposes of the record, I represent Joey Preston in a lawsuit that's been brought by Anderson County in the 10th Circuit Court of Common Pleas in Anderson. Under our procedural rules, I have an obligation to run through some basic preliminaries. You're entitled to a clear question by me. It's highly probable, particularly in light of the amount of sleep I've been getting lately, that I'm going to ask you a question at some point today that is either inartful, confusing, or just doesn't make sense. I'm not trying to trick you, and if that happens, what I need you to do is just say, I don't understand your question. Can you rephrase it? And I'll be glad to ask it another way or try to say it in different words to communicate what I'm asking more clearly. If you do answer, though, can we have the understanding that you did, in fact, understand my question? Can we agree on that?
Okay.
And I'm also not here to put you through some sort of endurance test. If at some point you need to stretch your legs or have some other comfort type activity, let me know and I'll be glad to take a 5 or 10 minute break or whatever the case may be. During the time the deposition is pending, there are some rules about consultation that you can have with your attorney. Obviously, you can always consult with your attorney about privilege, and there may be some documents we look at today that Tally will want to talk to you about. And she'll be entitled to do that. But otherwise, if you're on breaks or things like that, you should probably refrain from talking to your attorney about this deposition until it's over, because I will be entitled to ask you about what you talked about during this conversation while the deposition remains pending. I know that you've had your deposition taken before. How many times have you had your deposition taken?
I don't know exactly, but I think 5 times related to my county job.
Were all 5 times related to your county job?
Yes.
And when you say related to your county job, do you mean your position as county council member?
Yes.
When was the first time that you were deposed?
I take it back. Thank you. The first time was related to a community activity and an appeal to DHEC to deny permits to run a sewer down an environmentally fragile creek.
What creek was that?
That was Big Beaver Dam Creek.
And what year was that? Do you remember?
I think it was right after I came on council. We began to try to engage our local government in mid to late 98, and I was deposed in early 2001.
Do you remember who deposed you?
Elizabeth Crum, I think is the right name, from McNair.
I don't know.
She is from Columbia.
Let me ask you this question. What year did you first become a member of Anderson County Council?
I was sworn in 2001. I took my seat in 2001. The general election was in 2000.
And the Beaver Dam dispute was not in relation to your role as a county council member, was it?
No, you corrected me. I stand corrected.
When was the second time that you were deposed?
Gosh, I cannot remember. I think there are at least 4 or 5 times, but I cannot remember precisely. Oh, I think that would have been, I really don't know. I can tell you approximately what activities were going on when I was deposed, but I can't remember precisely.
Sorry to interrupt, Your Honor. We had an audible.
What was the next case you were deposed in? Let's do it that way.
I don't know if that's where Mr. Preston sued me in 2003, and then I'm trying to remember.
Now, what was the lawsuit that was pending in 2003?
That was a really strange one. He sued me for providing materials to SLED that came to my hands from different sources. I don't even know some of the sources. My district includes the Big Creek landfill, and that was a very contentious issue, along with the sewer line. and constituents living around there had literally hounded me for almost 3 years to get a proper investigation. There were materials that came to my hands that indicated that a little sports car that our then administrator drove had changed hands on paper, but was still in his possession. I called SLED and asked them to meet me. They sent 2 officers, Gene Donahue and Clint Kinley, and I met them at Gary Polyakoff's office, along with one of the constituents that fought the landfill,
Who was that?
Teresa Morgan.
What is your relationship with Teresa Morgan?
Teresa is one of my constituents. She is also chairman of the EMS Commission. I've come to greatly respect her and appreciate her community involvement.
Are you friends with Teresa Morgan?
We have become friends over the years.
Do you socialize with her?
No,
How frequently do you talk to her?
probably whenever an EMS issue comes up.
Do you respect and esteem Teresa Morgan?
I certainly respect and appreciate her research and diligence and her professionalism.
Apart from her diligence, research, and professionalism, do you respect and esteem Teresa Morgan as a person?
I would assume so.
Is she a good person?
She is a good person.
Now, that second lawsuit that you're talking about, were you sued in your official capacity by Mr. Preston in relation to information pertaining to his car?
That was, I think, the first suit that he filed against me, and Beatty Ashmore was his attorney. I didn't quite understand it because I simply gave material to SLED, asked them to investigate if the car was obtained through legitimate sources, etc. That's all they had to do was call me, and I could tell my constituents that that was the end of the road of their inquiries. That's all they could do. But if they found otherwise, then that was their professional domain. I didn't hear back from them, and I was sued within 2 to 3 months.
Okay, my question to you though is this. Were you sued in your capacity as an Anderson County Council member by Mr. Preston with respect to information pertaining to his car?
No, he sued me in my individual capacity, which became a great game for him because he knew there was not a majority in council who would have voted to cover my legal expenses. Bear in mind that the material provided to me would have never come to my hands if I had been an individual citizen.
Why would you have been entitled to have your attorney's fees paid by the county with respect to a tort alleged against you in your personal capacity?
Because it was a matter that involved county government issues, public expenditures, and I didn't have any dog in the fight except that I was the elected representative.
Now, you referenced certain materials. What materials were they?
I don't remember, but I do remember that it appeared the vehicle had changed hands on paper several times and still, reportedly, was in his personal possession.
Did the materials reflect that the vehicle changed hands several times, or did it reflect that the vehicle changed hands one time?
I do not remember.
Where did you get these materials?
Some of them came to me, left on my porch. Some of them came from citizens who looked up Carfax information.
Did any of them come from the Williamson dispatcher?
They have, and they have come from Lawrence and have come from DNR. I heard from different sources that those were run there too.
Were you the only defendant in that lawsuit?
No, there were 2 other men.
Who were they?
Robert Stansel, whom I didn't know very well, and Steve Lovelace, whom I knew a little better.
Had there ever been an occasion where you met with Lovelace or Stansel?
Yes.
How frequently did you meet with Stansel and Lovelace?
I don't remember. They would come sometimes with information.
Were both Lovelace and Stansel deposed in that lawsuit?
I don't really know. I think Lovelace might have been.
Did both Lovelace and Stansel indicate that you were the source of the information for them with respect to the BMW analysis?
I do not know.
Do you remember the name that was on whatever paperwork that you were looking at that caused you to believe that Mr. Preston had a BMW gifted to him?
I do remember that there was a lady with the last name of Preston, and she was listed as living on Cathwood Drive in Columbia, an owner of that vehicle, and I thought that was odd. I didn't know if that was a relative or what the situation was, but people said that they saw him driving the vehicle, so it didn't make any sense.
Was it Gene Preston, Jean?
I think so.
Did there ever come a time when that information was put on WAIM radio?
There may have been.
How did WAIM radio get that information?
I don't think they got it from me.
You certain about that?
I don't know. I don't remember that far back.
Did you ever find out who Gene Preston was?
I know my homeowner's insurance and Mr. Polyakoff indicated that In the discovery, the DMV claims that there were two different people, along with Mr. Preston, and that supposedly there was a glitch with the DMV computers. Supposedly there was a different person on Cathwood, and that lady, Miss Preston, lived in Round O. And I do remember that name because it's down near the coast. And supposedly they bought brand new vehicles on the same date from a dealership in Columbia that were sedans, I think they said. And that was supposedly the same date that Mr. Preston registered his vehicle. Strange explanation, but that's what I was told.
And do you have some reason to believe that the South Carolina Department of Motor Vehicles would make up a story like that?
I have no idea, but I can tell you this. If SLED had come back to me and told me that everything was straight up and that the paperwork that had been given to me was incorrect, that it was a computer glitch, that would have certainly been the end of the inquiry.
Would it have been?
There would have been nowhere else I could have gone.
Did you ever tell other people in the community that Mr. Preston had been given a BMW by a waste management company?
No. I did say that there was a question of that because the receptionist had indicated that Claude Graham had brought checks, and she believed that. But that's all I can tell you now.
Do you deny having told third parties that Mr. Preston received a BMW from a waste management company?
I deny saying you received it from them. I questioned it.
And the basis for you raising this whole issue of alleged impropriety was that you had paperwork wherein the name Gene Preston appeared.
I took that to the SLED agents. I asked them to look into it. If it was a straight-up acquisition, to let me know, and that would have been the end of the inquiry.
When was the next time you were deposed?
I can't quite remember, but it may have been in the Brandon Grace suit. I'm trying to remember. I do not remember.
Now, what were the claims in the Brandon Grace lawsuit?
He claimed that I defamed him. There was a question that came up in credit card billing statements that indicated he had taken a trip to North or South Dakota, and he signed off as the person taking the trip.
And what did you say about that trip?
I don't think I said very much. I just reprinted what someone else reviewed of the paperwork instead.
Reprinted it where now?
I handed out at some of our political functions. It was mostly a lot of the credit card questions.
Did you also maintain a website?
I paid someone to put up a website for my campaign, and they put some things in there that I later found out should not have gone on there.
Like what?
They put pictures of people attending there was some kind of a motorcycle rally, I think, there. I never saw them, but I had a constituent to call and said that they were pretty awful looking pictures, and called the guy and told him to take it off immediately.
And what was the outcome of the Brandon Grace lawsuit?
Do what?
The outcome of the Brandon Grace lawsuit?
Settlement.
How much did you pay Mr. Grace?
I didn't pay him anything.
How much did your insurance pay him?
I do not know.
Did you know at one point?
I heard some figures bandied about, and I think it was maybe 3,000 or something. It was sealed, Mr. Davis. I don't know.
Brandon Grace, was he formerly an employee of Anderson County?
He was an employee of Anderson County.
And what was the outcome of the Preston lawsuit from 2003?
On the basis of what my homeowner's attorney and Mr. Polyakov told me, I encouraged them to go forward. It was the first time I had ever been sued that I can remember, and it seemed to me that if there was a glitch at DMV, then that would have been a simple resolution to it. I begged them to go on to court and get it settled in a court of law, but they didn't, and it was settled.
In fact, a judgment was entered, was it not?
Do what?
A judgment was entered, was it not?
I don't know. I don't know what you mean.
Do you know what a judgment is?
Somewhat. I signed a settlement, if that's what you're getting at.
I didn't know I was getting anything, I was just asking questions. Do you recall an affidavit being submitted in the 2003 lawsuit filed by Mr. Preston in relation to the Williamston dispatcher?
No.
You don't remember that at all?
I remember some conversation, but I don't remember seeing such as that.
Do you remember any issues regarding prostitutes in relation to the Williamston dispatcher from that lawsuit?
No.
You have no idea what I'm talking about.
No, I don't.
The Brandon Grace lawsuit, were you sued in your official capacity?
Again, in my individual capacity. I don't think you will find that happening on current council, because these type of measures that people would use against individual council members that are pretty directly related to their positions, I don't think you will see that happen again.
Now, with respect to the Brandon Grace lawsuit, I thought you said that the website that you had mentioned had actually published inappropriate materials.
I never saw it, Mr. Davis. I had a call from a constituent who pulled it up. I paid a guy during the campaign to put up a website. I was trying to be more modern, and he put material on there that I didn't realize was on there. Once I found out it was on there, I asked him to take it off.
Was the material untrue?
I don't know, but it was distasteful. I'm talking about the photographs.
What was the next lawsuit that you were deposed in?
I don't remember. I remember Preston sued Bob Waldrop and me.
Were you deposed in that lawsuit?
I don't think I was.
What about the FOIA lawsuit? Were you deposed in that one?
What FOIA lawsuit are you talking about? I'm not following you.
Do you recall filing a lawsuit under the Freedom of Information Act against Mr. Preston?
Yes. Oh, yes. Thank you.
And so I guess the question there was, were you deposed in that one?
I was, as was he.
The Preston FOIA lawsuit, were you sued in your official capacity in that lawsuit?
No. That was a writ of mandamus that Jay Bender recommended to open the public records. The financial records and the legal invoices, so to speak. Legal expense files, not the case files.
And the last lawsuit that you talked about, that was filed by Mr. Preston against you and Mr. Waldrop. Were you sued in your official capacity in that lawsuit?
I was sued in my individual capacity, and what was alleged was impossible under the law, being sued in the individual capacity. Judge Nicholson directed Nancy Bloodgood from his seat. Don't you want to change your plea? And of course she did. So then we were sued in our official capacity instead of our unofficial capacity.
Is that your understanding of what happened?
That is?
And let's put the official versus individual capacity issue aside for a moment. You were actually enjoined in that lawsuit, were you not?
What does that mean?
As a preliminary injunction, the court issued an order telling you to knock it off. That kind of order.
Oh, yeah.
We call it a knock it off order. I don't know how else to explain it.
It was a bizarre situation because I was, frankly, afraid to go into the courthouse without someone with me.
Well, I was just confused because when I first started asking you about these depositions, I thought you told me they all related to your capacity as a county council member.
Mr. Davis, I wouldn't have been involved in any legal action other than trying to protect our property rights in the first instance if I hadn't been in an elected position and had constituents who had questions or material came to me in that role that begged questions.
I guess that's what you meant earlier when you said it was all related to your role as a county council member?
That's the way I perceived it.
So all the lawsuits were against you individually, but what you meant was they were against you individually but related to your role as a county council member.
It's best made into a synopsis that our former administrator apparently believed that if he kept after me legally, that it would drive me broke. And he was right, because being sued in one's individual capacity means that you have to come up with your own sources. And in my case, it frequently meant my homeowner's insurance. Finally, my insurance dropped me.
So in your view, what happened was that Mr. Preston just kept coming after you.
I believe so.
I was just curious. I'd like to ask you a little bit about the lawsuit that Anderson County brought against Mr. Preston. Are you familiar with the allegations in that lawsuit?
I can't tell you specifically. I know it's seeking to have the contract invalidated, and I personally believed that that was a contrivance, the buyout.
How about the allegations that relate to Palmetto Agriculture Consultants? Do you know what those are about?
I do. I guess it was around October of '07 this is. I frequently looked at the General Ledger finance reports, and there was one called the GLR 110, and it was like a weekly check register, and there was a notation of Palmetto Agriculture Consulting being paid out of our county council, matching grant funds, special projects. It had title 5827, I believe, was that department number. And I was curious what was being paid out of funds that would have been under our purview. And I had never heard of Palmetto Agricultural Consulting. And I started asking, and nobody would tell me. I think our clerk to council looked up on the Secretary of State's website, and that was a consulting firm headed by Allison Sham. And I knew Allison. That was Ron Wilson's daughter.
And so let me take you back a little bit right before where you were. Did you participate in any of the contract negotiations for the original Palmetto Agricultural Consultants contract?
No.
If it's okay with you, I'd like to just call it PAC so I don't have to keep calling out that big long name. PAC for Palmetto Agricultural Consultants.
Well, there are political action committees too, so I think you might want to say Palmetto.
well, I'm going to call it PAC, but when I use the word PAC or PAC in this deposition, I'll be referring to Palmetto Agricultural Consultants, okay? And I won't be talking about political action committees. So you didn't have anything to do with the original negotiations with respect to the first PAC contract, right?
No.
And you weren't copied on any of the correspondence in relation to that?
No.
So the first time you found out about it was after that contract had been executed and it appeared on GLR 110.
I didn't even know there was a contract in it, I don't guess, until later, after I inquired about the name. And see, I knew Allison. Allison had no agricultural background. I was pretty surprised.
How do you know that?
Because at that time, Ron Wilson and his family were supposedly friendly acquaintances of ours. And at that point, I was sending my daughter's little outgrown riding clothes to Allison for her little daughter. And I knew that she had been, I think, a school teacher or had her background in education. And they were starting to, I think they acquired additional property from what Cassie had gotten through, I guess, a will or family passing, and they were setting up their farm.
And Allison was working on the farm, wasn't she?
Probably at that time. I know Ron told me, and don't hold me to timelines, but it's something along that time span that he was acquiring additional land and that he was looking to get into, I guess, more of an organic type form of farming.
And Allison's husband worked on the farm too, didn't he?
I don't know, but I do know that we had free advice from Clemson University, one of the most esteemed agriculture schools in the country, and we had a sustainable agriculture expert, Dr. Jeff Zender, who was giving the county free advice or low-cost advice. We had Clemson Extension Service, so it was extraordinary that we would hire someone out of the county for what we could get for free or nothing or low cost.
Now, did you participate in any of the discussions that occurred prior to that original PAC contract's execution?
I don't recall any such thing. I think we may have mentioned sometime in council meetings that we needed to support our farmers more. But remember, she is out of the county. She is not qualified. So why would I have discussed her?
Well, I know you wanted to tell me about all that, but the real question I wanted to know was whether you participated in the process that led up to the original PAC contract's execution. And I understand you to say no. Is that fair?
Yes. I had no knowledge of her being brought into the county as a consultant until I saw those notations, and then I began my inquiry.
Now, at some point, that PAC contract was amended, was it not?
I am not aware.
There was a second contract that Mr.